Warren Buffett shocked his own family with a decision they never saw coming. Imagine living decades in the same modest Omaha home, quietly building a fortune that would one day reach billions, and then telling your children that most of it would never come directly to them. To the world, it sounded almost unbelievable, a man with unimaginable wealth choosing to give it away. But to Buffett, it wasn't about denial or control. It was about a deeper legacy, the kind that outlives any bank account. What he did wasn't just about dollars. It was about teaching his children, and by extension all of us, that true inheritance lies in trust, in freedom, and in the dignity of knowing how to stand on your own. That's a message that resonates especially after 60, when many seniors wonder not just what they'll leave behind, but how they'll be remembered. Stay with me, because later in this video, I'll share a hidden truth behind Buffett's choice. One that few people ever discuss, but that still shapes how his family remembers him today. And as you listen, I want you to think about your own legacy. Which matters more to you, leaving money or leaving values? Drop money or values in the comments. If wisdom after 60 inspires you, like this video and subscribe to Next Age Wisdom. Together, we'll uncover habits that build not just wealth, but meaning. Warren Buffett is often introduced to the world as the Oracle of Omaha. But to those who knew him most intimately, he was a quiet father whose life looked very different from the image people expect of a billionaire. While Wall Street executives built vacation homes, bought yachts, and showcased their wealth, Buffett remained deeply tied to his Midwestern roots. He lived in the same Omaha house he purchased in 1958, a home that was modest, practical, and unassuming. For decades, that house stood as a symbol not of what he couldn't afford, but of what he chose to value. It was a space where family dinners, quiet routines, and stability mattered more than prestige. Even his mornings reflected the same mindset. Instead of designer meals or exotic indulgences, Buffett often stopped at McDonald's on his way to the office. He ordered simple breakfasts, sometimes even deciding whether he'd go with the cheaper option or splurge on the bacon and egg sandwich, depending on how the stock market had closed the previous day. To outsiders, these choices seemed almost laughable. Why would a billionaire think about a couple of dollars? But to Buffett, these were daily reinforcements of a principle. Wealth may shape circumstances, but values shape character. For his children, growing up in this household created a unique perspective. They knew their father could buy nearly anything. Yet, they also saw him ignore the trappings of luxury. That contrast could have been confusing, but it became a lifelong lesson. They realized that their father was teaching them through example that money was never meant to be the measure of a life. What mattered more was consistency, discipline, humility, and the courage to live according to one's values, even when the world expects otherwise. This story resonates, especially with seniors reflecting on what kind of legacy they want to leave. After 60, many begin to measure not only their financial security, but also the kind of message their lives will carry forward. Buffett's life shows that it isn't always the big gestures that define a legacy. Sometimes it is the repeated, ordinary choices that leave the deepest imprint on a family. Choosing the same home for decades, valuing a simple breakfast over extravagance, and finding satisfaction in routines rather than in endless upgrades all send a message that values are stronger than possessions. For seniors in America, the UK, Canada, and Australia, this perspective is profoundly liberating. Not everyone will leave behind vast wealth, but everyone can leave behind a pattern of life that speaks louder than numbers on a bank statement. Families may forget the specific gifts or the size of an inheritance, but they will not forget the example of a life lived with clarity and purpose. Warren Buffett's quiet fatherhood reminds us that dignity is not found in grandeur, but in authenticity. And when seniors embrace that truth, they pass on a legacy that multiplies far beyond money. The legacy of living proof that simplicity itself is strength. While Buffett's daily habits revealed humility, it was one single choice that truly defined the kind of legacy he wanted to leave. For decades, his children quietly assumed that at least part of their father's immense fortune would one day become theirs. After all, most families, no matter how modest or wealthy, often think of inheritance as a natural outcome of hard work and success. But Buffett disrupted that expectation with a decision no one close to him fully anticipated. He declared that nearly his entire fortune would bypass his children and flow instead into philanthropy. This was not an offhand announcement. It was a deliberate public commitment that stunned not only his family, but also the financial world. When the news broke, critics debated whether it was fair. Admirers called it visionary. But for his children, it was personal. Imagine hearing that the billions of dollars connected to your family name, wealth that could secure every comfort for generations, would instead be directed outward to strangers you may never meet. The initial reaction could only have been shock. Yet over time, that shock evolved into something deeper, relief. Buffett's children later admitted that his choice, while surprising, spared them from the heavy burden of entitlement. Without billions guaranteed, they were free to carve out their own identities and pursue their own goals without being overshadowed by comparisons. It is one thing to inherit security. It is another to inherit a legacy so large it threatens to silence your own story. Buffett's decision allowed his children to live without that weight, even if it meant letting go of assumptions they once held. The reasoning behind this bold move reveals Buffett's clear philosophy. I want to give my kids enough so they can do anything, but not so much that they can do nothing. Those words cut to the heart of what it means to be a parent, especially later in life. Seniors know that the love they give their families cannot be measured in currency alone. Providing too little may leave children vulnerable, but providing too much can rob them of resilience, drive, and purpose. For seniors reflecting on their own lives, this lesson carries power. Many worry about how their children or grandchildren will perceive their estate, whether it will be seen as generous or lacking, whether it will spark gratitude or disappointment. Buffett's story reframes that worry entirely. The real question is not how much will they get, but what will they become because of what I leave? What could be financial support, but it could also be the gift of responsibility, the strength of discipline, or the confidence to navigate life without leaning too heavily on what someone else built. Buffett's decision may not be one that every parent or grandparent chooses to follow. Not everyone has billions to give away, and not every family would respond the same way. But the principle behind it touches every household. Legacy is about more than money. Legacy is the opportunity you leave behind for others to grow, to create, and to carry forward values that money alone can never secure. In the end, Buffett's family came to see his decision not as a rejection, but as an act of freedom. He gave them something rarer than wealth, the chance to stand on their own. And that is a challenge worth considering for anyone thinking about the story they'll leave behind. His announcement left many wondering why he would make such a bold choice. But the reasoning was far less about money than it was about meaning. Buffett often summed it up with a single line: I want to give my kids enough so they can do anything, but not so much that they can do nothing. Behind those words was a lifetime of watching how wealth could either sharpen a person's character or quietly erode it. He had seen heirs who lost their sense of purpose, families who grew divided over inheritances, and children who mistook privilege for identity. He was determined that his family would not fall into that pattern. By deciding to give away nearly all of his fortune, he was not turning his back on his children, but offering them something he considered far more valuable: the chance to live without the weight of billions dictating who they were supposed to be. They would still have his support, but they would also have the freedom to shape lives defined by their own choices, mistakes, and victories. For Buffett, that was the essence of dignity. For seniors, his reasoning touches a timeless truth. Many spend their later years worrying if they will leave enough behind, as though a number on a page will be the measure of their love. Yet the deepest inheritance is rarely financial. It is the resilience that carries a child through hard times, the courage to stand firm when life turns uncertain, the values that steady a family even when money is scarce. These are the gifts that cannot be taxed, divided, or spent away. This understanding can be liberating. You may not be able to pass down great wealth, but you can pass down something more enduring. Your story, your example, your hard-earned wisdom. A letter written to a grandchild, the memory of how you faced setbacks with grace, or the tradition you protected for decades may outlive every dollar. Buffett's words remind us that money can only carry a person so far, but meaning can carry them through a lifetime. What makes his reasoning powerful is that it reframes legacy itself. Instead of measuring love by the size of an estate, it invites us to measure it by the strength of the values we leave behind. In choosing to limit his children's inheritance, Buffett wasn't withholding. He was ensuring that their lives would be defined by their own resilience. And that decision, more than any dollar figure, became the inheritance that mattered most. What makes Buffett's philosophy so striking is that it is not limited to billionaires. It applies to every family, regardless of wealth or circumstance. His decision was financial, but the wisdom behind it speaks to something far more universal. How we choose to communicate, how we prepare those we love, and what kind of story we leave behind. For seniors, this is where the lesson becomes practical and deeply personal. So often, the focus in later years is on numbers. Will there be enough savings to cover retirement? Will there be something left for children or grandchildren? While these concerns are real, they can also obscure the bigger truth. Money is only one part of legacy. What endures across generations is not the balance of an account, but the values, lessons, and connections that give those dollars meaning. Buffett reminds us that the way we live and the clarity with which we share our wisdom becomes the true inheritance. Instead of pouring all energy into calculating finances, seniors can begin by having honest conversations with family. Clear communication about hopes, fears, and expectations can prevent misunderstandings that money alone cannot solve. A child who knows their parent's heart is far less likely to feel disappointed than one who is left to interpret silence. A grandchild who hears the stories of resilience, how a grandmother endured loss, or how a grandfather built a life from modest beginnings, receives a gift no inheritance can match. Another layer is emotional legacy. Too often, families avoid discussing values because the conversations feel less urgent than writing wills or dividing property. Yet it is those values that hold a family together long after possessions are gone. Imagine sitting with a son or daughter and telling them, "This is what I stood for, and this is what I hope you carry on." That single moment may shape their life more than any financial gift. Seniors in America, the UK, Canada, and Australia can all recognize the power of this truth. Your story, shared in your own voice, is irreplaceable. A simple exercise makes this real. Take a quiet evening and write down 3 values you want to pass on. Values that no dollar amount could ever replace. Maybe it is faith, resilience, kindness, or the importance of education. Once you've written them, share at least one with a loved one this week. It could be through a conversation, a letter, or even a small tradition revived. That act of sharing ensures the value lives on, woven into your family's story. This exercise also reframes the fear of not enough. Many seniors worry their estate will be too small, but what matters most is not the size of the inheritance, but the meaning behind it. Even modest possessions become treasures when tied to memory and purpose. A family recipe, a handwritten note, or a simple story of perseverance can outlast stocks, bonds, or property. In this sense, Buffett's philosophy offers peace of mind. You may not leave riches, but you can leave richness. The anchor is simple yet powerful. Money can fade, but meaning multiplies. Seniors who embrace this truth discover that their influence is not measured in dollars, but in the strength of the lessons and love they hand down. And when families gather in future generations, it will not be the money that defines them. It will be the values carried forward from a life lived with purpose. Every powerful decision, no matter how wise in the long run, meets resistance at first. Warren Buffett understood this when he shared his plan to give away nearly all of his fortune rather than leaving it directly to his children. His choice raised eyebrows not only in financial circles but also within his own household. To those on the outside, it seemed almost harsh. Why would a father with billions not simply pass that security onto his family? Inside the family, there were moments of doubt and questions that could not be ignored. His children had grown up surrounded by the knowledge of extraordinary wealth. For them to hear that this wealth would not flow into their hands naturally stirred emotions. Seniors can relate deeply to this tension. Many know the difficulty of making a decision that family members may not immediately understand. Whether it's downsizing a home, rewriting a will, or setting boundaries that go against expectations, such choices often lead to uncomfortable conversations. The fear of disappointing loved ones or appearing unkind is very real. Yet, Buffett's story illustrates that disappointment in the moment can transform into respect and even gratitude when seen in the light of years. His children later admitted that his choice gave them freedom rather than chains. By removing the pressure of entitlement, he offered them space to create their own lives. This pattern appears in countless families, not just those with billions at stake. A grandmother who decides to leave money to education rather than split it evenly among relatives may face resistance. A grandfather who chooses to give possessions away during his lifetime, instead of letting them be fought over later, may be met with confusion. These decisions, however, are often acts of love in disguise. They prevent division, cultivate independence, and protect family members from burdens they might not yet recognize. For seniors, the lesson is twofold. First, expect resistance. Even wise choices may not be celebrated immediately. Second, trust that clarity and consistency will carry weight over time. Children and grandchildren may resist now, but later they may see the wisdom in choices rooted in values rather than mere convenience. The temporary sting of surprise can give way to lifelong respect when the purpose behind the decision becomes clear. What helps most is communication. Buffett did not hide behind silence. He explained his reasoning publicly and privately. Seniors can learn from this. When tough decisions must be made, it is better to share the reasoning openly than to leave family guessing. A difficult truth explained with love is easier to accept than a surprise revealed without context. The reality is that legacy is not always about making everyone happy. It is about leaving behind strength, clarity, and purpose. Families may push back at first, but in time they often realize the gift was never about money or possessions. It was about freedom. And that freedom, though not always appreciated immediately, becomes one of the greatest inheritances of all. Beneath the public explanations and the memorable quote about giving children enough to do anything but not so much they do nothing, there was another layer to Buffett's reasoning that he rarely expressed openly. His choice to direct his fortune outward was not just about shaping his children's independence or making a philanthropic statement to the world. At its core, it was about peace of mind. Buffett had witnessed what unrestrained wealth can do to families. He knew that money, when inherited without limits, can become less a blessing and more a burden, fueling rivalry, entitlement, and dependency. For him, avoiding that outcome was not control, but liberation, both for himself and for those he loved. The hidden truth was that Buffett wanted his children to be free from the prison of wealth. He understood that large sums of money can silently erode purpose, trapping people in lives defined by ease rather than effort. By limiting inheritance, he wasn't withholding comfort. He was giving them the rare chance to live without the weight of billions dictating their identity. It was a decision anchored not in denial, but in a desire for harmony, simplicity, and the assurance that his family would be guided by values rather than bank accounts. For seniors, this insight carries powerful relevance. Many believe that financial security is the ultimate form of love, but Buffett's example challenges that view. True security, especially after 60, does not lie only in accumulated wealth. It lies in the strength of relationships that outlast possessions, in the clarity of purpose that carries through hardship, and in the wisdom that shapes how a family navigates life. Numbers on a statement can rise and fall, but the stability of shared values, trust, and resilience endures through generations. This perspective offers relief to seniors who feel pressure to measure their worth by what they leave behind financially. The lesson is clear. Your greatest legacy may not be what you deposit into an account, but what you deposit into the hearts of those you love. Peace of mind comes not from ensuring your children never want for money, but from knowing they are equipped to live fully and wisely no matter what circumstances they face. Buffett's hidden truth echoes quietly but powerfully. Wealth can build walls or open doors, but it is wisdom, purpose, and love that secure a family's future. Seniors who embrace this lesson discover that their story is not defined by assets, but by the values that give those assets meaning. And in the end, that is the form of security no fortune can ever replace. As Buffett's story unfolds, it leaves us with truths that reach far beyond the realm of billionaires and into the lives of ordinary families. His decisions, his reasoning, and the values behind them all point to anchors we can hold on to, especially in the later chapters of life when questions of legacy become more pressing. These anchors are not abstract ideas. They're guiding lights that can shape how seniors approach their own stories. The first anchor is simple yet profound. Wealth fades, wisdom multiplies. Money has a limit. It can be spent, divided, lost, or diminished by time. But wisdom, once shared, carries into future generations. A grandparent's story about resilience during hardship, a handwritten letter explaining the principles that shaped a lifetime, or a tradition preserved through decades. These outlast any financial inheritance. Wisdom is not bound by currency. It is multiplied every time it is remembered and lived out by those who come after us. The second anchor reminds us that family isn't about inheritance. It's about influence. Too often, the conversation around legacy gets reduced to material possessions. Yet influence, the quiet ways we shape values, character, and identity, carries more weight than any estate. A father teaching honesty by example, a grandmother showing compassion through action, an elder reminding the family to forgive and reconcile. These are the imprints that money cannot replicate. Influence is subtle but lasting, weaving itself into how children and grandchildren navigate their own lives. The third anchor may be the hardest to accept. Your greatest legacy may not be what they expect. Loved ones may hope for financial comfort or material gifts, but the legacy that shapes them most may come in unexpected forms. It may be the discipline you modeled when life was uncertain, the courage you displayed in loss, or the laughter you shared even in modest circumstances. Legacy is rarely about what fits neatly into an account statement. It is about the echoes of who you were and how you lived. For seniors, embracing these anchors can transform how you see your own story. Instead of worrying about leaving enough, focus on leaving what endures: wisdom, influence, and authenticity. Ask yourself, what is the one lesson I want my family to never forget? That single truth, lived and passed on, can shape generations more powerfully than wealth ever could. So here's the challenge. What's one lesson you want your family to never forget? Share it, write it down, or speak it aloud. And remember, your voice is your legacy. Use it now while it matters most. Together, we grow wiser, stronger, and free. Subscribe to Next Age Wisdom, because the next video uncovers a little-known habit Buffett still practices daily. Check the playlist for more billionaire habits after 60, and keep building a legacy that lasts far beyond numbers.